Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports. Really excited to talk about the Charlotte Hornets in today's video as we give our offseason preview and what's really in store ahead of us for the Charlotte Hornets. Now, I know a lot of Hornets fans watch the channel. First of all, I'm really excited about your guys' future. I hope you are as well. We're going to talk about that a lot in this video. So if you guys do enjoy the content and you want more coverage of the Charlotte Hornets through the NBA draft cycle this year and the offseason through free agency and all the other videos I plan on making, be sure to subscribe to the channel for more. Also leave a like, it lets me know I did a good job in this video. And let's jump into it now with our video preview. We're going to look at the past season, the 2023-2024 season recap. We're going to give my thoughts on what we saw from this Hornets team, some of the things we didn't see from this team. Then we're going to turn our eyes to their head coaching search. Obviously, unique to the Hornets from some of the other teams in the lottery this year, they have a head coaching position to fill. So we'll talk about that. We have two finalists currently for the position from all of the reports. We're also looking at the NBA draft lottery odds for this team and then some prospects that they should consider taking. I'll talk about each and every one of them and how they could help the Hornets win moving forward. Really, that's the most important thing. You draft to win. And I think that the Hornets have some good options on the table for them in this year's draft. We'll then look at NBA free agency situations and targets, guys that could help them if they're able to open up cap space. And if not, well, I also have some non-taxpayer mid-level exception targets. So very well built out list of targets here for the Hornets this offseason, guys that I think could again help this team move forward in the win column. Then we'll look at the franchise direction going into next season and beyond. Like I said, probably the most hyped up I've been about Hornets basketball in a long time. I think some of the recent changes to the organization have been very, very good. That's exactly where we have to start with our season recap. There's an ownership change. Michael Jordan sold the team to Gabe Plotkin and Rick Schnall. That is a massive change of direction for this Hornets team. I think Michael Jordan, heck of a player, right? Just never really found the success as an owner that I think a lot of Hornets fans were hoping for and probably aspiring for when they heard that MJ was buying the team way back when. So it's a little bit of a difficult, situation. The fact that he just never really won there with Charlotte. Obviously, it was cool having Michael Jordan as the owner, but I think this change is one that's going to be beneficial long term. And as a result, there's been kind of a long stretch of steps here of position changes within the front office, position changes within the coaching staff, which means we say goodbye to Mitch Kupchak. We say goodbye kind of to Steve Clifford. He's staying with the organization in some capacity, but I think getting those two guys out, Mitch Kupchak just has failed to build a winner with the Hornets in his tenure there as GM. Obviously, one of his big decisions was letting go of Borrego. Well, that didn't really work out very well. Borrego really got this team as close to competitive and good basketball as we've seen in recent history for the Hornets. And then Steve Clifford I didn't like the hire when they brought him back in to Charlotte. I just didn't really understand the decision there. Honestly, you could tell it was a contingency plan. They didn't get the guy they really wanted in Kenny Atkinson. And as a result, they pivoted to Steve Clifford. Just did not work out. So it's good that he is no longer the head coach of the Charlotte Hornets. They also made some trades. Gordon Hayward, PJ Washington, Terry Rozier all got traded. That brought in a collection of new faces that I think had some really positive play for the Charlotte Hornets this past season. There's some players in there that the Hornets are going to want to keep moving forward. However, same old for Charlotte. They only won 21 games this year, 21-61 record. But I think the big positive from this past season was Brandon Miller's play. He looked phenomenal. Obviously, a lock for all-rookie first team. He was really, really great. There's a reason he finished in the top 4 on my NBA draft big board from the 2023 draft, which is, by the way, looking to be a historic NBA draft. I think, like I said back then, the top 5 or 6 players from that draft are going to be all-time great in comparison to other draft classes. The depth in that draft, the top-end talent in that draft, is just really, really special. And I think as a byproduct of that, people are looking at the 2024 draft as really disappointing, when in reality, the 2024 draft has some really good players. The 2023 draft was just loaded with talent. So Brandon Miller, obviously a player who shined at Alabama in his lone season there, shined with the Charlotte Hornets, went from a pro-styled offense to another pro-styled offense and found a lot of success and translated very quickly to the NBA. Now, I think the big thing for him is how does he continue to improve his craft. Obviously, the Paul George comparison is one most people are going to look at and rely upon when they talk about Miller's upside. But I think the big thing for him is, can he get to the rim more frequently? Can he be a player who's going to put on and exert more rim pressure? And how does that playmaking development come from him as well? Those will be the big areas to watch for. And then the injury bug struck Charlotte again this season. LaMelo Ball played in just 22 games this year. Mark Williams played in only 19 games. So when you consider the fact that this team came into the year with an over-under win total of 31.5, with those two guys missing so many games, it makes sense that this team underperformed to the level that they did. Only 21 wins on the year compared to that 31.5 over-under mark to begin the season. So that is understandable. First of all, that this team's not going to be very good. I think they had an outdated head coach, and they didn't have some of their top-end talent. LaMelo Ball, Mark Williams, two of their best 5 players on the roster. That's difficult to swallow, having those guys not on your actual team for a majority of the season. But with some of the trades that they made, I do think that they have pivoted for a better long-term future. Terry Rozier, they were able to get a draft pick for. And then they brought in some young talent as well. Trey Mann seemed to find a kind of role for himself in the league in Charlotte, which is an obvious positive that is worth highlighting. He played really, really well there after really being a DNP CD merchant in OKC, just with the depth of talent that the Thunder had. He didn't have a role there, but in Charlotte, he quickly found minutes and found some success with those minutes as well. Vasi Micic, obviously someone who has a good passing skill set, someone who can be a floor general playmaker type. He also had some pretty impressive scoring games for Charlotte after the trade deadline. So we'll see what happens with him. I'm going to talk about him later in this video as well as a trade candidate, just because of his contract and the Hornets' possible avenues to opening up money this offseason. But Micic definitely did play well this season with the Hornets. Then Grant Williams honestly outperformed PJ Washington this year. From a statistical standpoint there in Charlotte, I think Grant Williams had a better impact on winning for Charlotte, and he just statistically played better, was more efficient, shot the ball better from 3, and then definitely scored the ball more as well than PJ Washington did. So yes, the team traded some of their players, they traded some of their core pieces, but they were able to bring back younger players, draft picks, and assets. They have the 2027 first that is top 2 protected from Dallas now as well. So the Hornets, I think they have really pivoted very quickly, and they've done a good job in a majority of their trades, getting a first rounder for Terry Rozier, getting a first rounder for PJ Washington. That's 2 big home run swings that I think are going to pay out pretty well for the Hornets long term. And this season they rostered 26 guys, a lot of turnover. That's part of that franchise direction we're going to talk about later, where this team just shuffled the deck a lot. They made a lot of different changes, a lot of different players played for the team. It's tough to win when you have something like that going on. You're constantly cycling in new guys. Obviously, at the deadline, you completely blow things up, trade almost half of your roster. That's going to shake some things up as well. But with that, the injury bug, it's not really fair to pin any of the players with, losing efforts or anything like that. I think this team played pretty hard this year. They just didn't have the talent, especially with the injuries, to keep up with some of the other teams in the NBA, which is totally okay. They have a chance this offseason to improve their roster further after they find their head coach. And I think that's the most important place to start. The 2 finalists right now that are reported to be in consideration for the Charlotte Hornets head coaching job is JJ Redick, obviously part of the Mind the Game podcast with LeBron James. That's an excellent listen. Really gets my mind thinking on a lot of different things. I've very much enjoyed listening to those two speak about basketball. And also Celtics coach Charles Lee. He's an assistant right now in Boston. Also spent some time as an assistant in Milwaukee under Mike Budenholzer with the Bucks a couple of years ago. He was part of the Celtics going out and finding kind of established assistant coaches to put around Joe Mazzulla. Obviously, as a result, the Celtics have been fantastic again this season. Joe Mazzulla deserves a majority of the credit. He's the head coach there, but Charles Lee, obviously someone who has contributed to that as well. These two are believed to be the finalists for the job. So you might want to know, well, who would you hire if you were in Rick Schnall's position? You're trying to figure out who the next head coach of the organization is going to be. First of all, I think that either of these guys are great options. Now, I know some purists are going to say, well, you shouldn't hire JJ Redick. He's not a coach right now. You should hire Charles Lee. He's got coaching experience. And I think that's definitely a fair way to look at it. Not only does he have coaching experience, but he has winning experience. He has coached very, very good teams. He's been a part of very good coaching staffs under Budenholzer, under Joe Mazzulla now. I think Charles Lee is a very well-established assistant coach in this league and someone who is going to become a quality head coach at some point. Plus, he's a little bit younger than your typical head coaching candidate. I think getting young minds, fresh perspectives in Charlotte is going to be one of the most important things. And having someone come from a winning organization like Boston, like Milwaukee was, I think will also be important for the Hornets in finding their head coaching search. Kind of reminiscent of when the Orlando Magic hired Jamal Mosley from the Dallas Mavericks a few seasons ago. Obviously, we've seen Mosley find a ton of success with that Magic team. I think Charles Lee could be another example of the coach going from an assistant position to a head coaching job as a younger head coach and finding some of that success. And then Redick, obviously, his playing career speaks for itself. His play style definitely is something that comes from the ability to understand how to move off the ball. And I think some of his ideas from his podcast and from the way that he talks about the sport, he's a genius, okay? Like, I really do think he's one of the smarter people covering basketball in the entire world. I think his understanding of the game is top notch. Now, yes, he doesn't have the head coaching history, but the one thing he does have is a lot of experience working with superstar players, role players, and everyone in between. He's somebody who understands the role player life in the NBA. I think he could connect very well with players in a locker room because of that, because that's exactly what he was as a sharpshooter in the NBA. But it's very clear as well that he's got good charisma to him. He builds good relationships with superstars. The fact that he has a running podcast with LeBron James, with LeBron being a free agent, by the way, just going to throw that out there. Definitely interesting, right? Because Redick is able to form some of those connections. So when you're looking at a head coach, obviously the X's and O's are the most important thing. The scheme that they're going to bring, all of that stuff matters way more than charisma or anything like that. But having a coach who is going to be well liked by players, both at the top of the roster and the bottom of the roster, is also very important. I think Redick's going to fit that criteria as well. So when it comes to their NBA draft lottery odds, how do they go about adding some more talent for whoever is coaching the team, whether that be Charles Lee or JJ Redick? Well, the Hornets have the third best odds in the 2024 NBA draft lottery. They have a 13.3% chance at locking up the number one pick. The end of the season worked perfectly for Charlotte. The Spurs won a couple of games down the stretch. That pushed them all the way down to 5th. And Portland, they find themselves tied with the Hornets in terms of records. So with that, the tiebreaker obviously is essential for those two teams, but looking at the percentages, they are tied across the board for their odds in the lottery, which gives Charlotte a pretty decent chance at the first overall pick, a 13.3% chance, but they have a pretty overwhelming chance to be in the top 4. Looking at those numbers just holistically, you're looking around 45 to 50% chance to being in the top 4, which is a good mark to be at. There's a 27% chance they're picking 6, which is most likely the lowest that you would see them on draft night. That's like the worst case outcome. That's very realistic. Obviously, they could fall to 7th, but there's only a 7% chance of that. They would need 4 teams below them to jump up in the lottery. So I don't think that's extremely likely. So the Hornets are going to be probably picking in the top 6, and if I had to guess, probably in the top 5. So this is a great opportunity for Charlotte to add some talent. So what kind of talent could they really add? Let's talk about some of the draft prospects that make some good deal of sense for them. There's a few that I really want to consider here for the Charlotte Hornets. I have a wide list of prospects here that I do think would be in consideration for the Hornets, and there's a few different reasons why. Donovan Clingan, let's go left to right here. Donovan Clingan of UConn. Now, I know some Hornets fans are going to say, we just drafted Mark Williams a couple of years ago. He's our starting center of the future. Here's a couple of things. You're going to have a brand new GM. You're going to have brand new ownership. While they probably do view Mark Williams as part of their long-term future, there isn't this overwhelming sense of commitment to him, especially since he just missed so many games this past season. There's probably some concerns about his injury history and just being able to stay on the floor. Whether that's fair or not, that's just probably the likely reality within the building. So if the evaluators fall in love with Donovan Clingan and view him as an elite screen setter for LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller, someone who can free up open shots for those two guys as a screen setter both on and off the basketball, and as well as his ability to rebound, defend, anchor a defense. I think he's one of the more pro-ready prospects in this entire draft class with his just sheer size, ability to impact the game on both ends of the floor. He's played in a pro-style offense, understands how to work out a delay action. He's going to be good at the top of the key working in the DHOs. He's just a very good prospect and a player who is very, very sound. Predominantly is going to be used in drop coverage, which Charlotte doesn't really have a collection of great screen navigators at this point. That's going to be a red flag for them if they do draft Donovan Clingan. But this is, again, a pick to build with. It's not necessarily a build-around player. This is a pick that is going to help them take steps forward in winning, and Clingan's definitely a player who can do that. Cody Williams is your big-time upside swing here in the lottery in the top 10. Let's assume the Hornets maybe pick somewhere between 4 and 8. 4 and 7 obviously is the lowest that they could actually be. This is where Cody Williams, his kind of range begins for me, because I think even though some people are quite a bit lower on him, a lot of his tools really do pop off. He's an incredible driver of the basketball. His efficiency on drives this year was very impressive, especially for a wing. Typically, you think about guys who are going to get to the paint as guards, someone with elite burst. I think that Cody Williams is an underrated handle and an underrated prospect with his ability to get to the rim. And then off of that, he's also, I think, a growing playmaker and someone who, yes, he didn't shoot the ball a ton. I continue to have to say this on all of my videos, but when he did shoot the ball, he shot it very, very well. So he's kind of the opposite of Brandon Miller. Miller's first trait coming into the NBA was, wow, this kid can really shoot it. Cody Williams, a little bit of the opposite. He's a really good driver of the basketball, but when he does shoot, he shoots it well. So I think if you're looking from a fit perspective, getting some more downhill juice and creation ability on their offense, especially when it comes to rim pressure and finding ways to get to the paint, Cody Williams fits that. But if we're talking about the high-end version of that, that might be Ron Holland in this draft. He's probably got the most downhill juice in the entire class, whether it's for good or worse. Like, he forces his way downhill. Sometimes that means he's going to play into traffic and turn the ball over. That's going to be a problem. His playmaking field isn't quite there yet. But around him with Miller, who I think is growing in the playmaking area, and then also LaMelo Ball, who's one of the better playmakers in the entire NBA, Ron Holland has the play finishing skill set to probably complement those two. And he plays in a completely different style. He plays with physicality. He looks to create contact and finish through traffic. And he's going to get to the free throw line a lot, something that Brandon Miller and LaMelo Ball both are a little bit more finesse style players. Now, they both have certain elements to their game, like LaMelo Ball has elite positional size. Brandon Miller has thrown down some vicious dunks this year. So I'm not saying that they can't get to the rim. They just don't do it as frequently as someone like Ron Holland. So it kind of creates a different way of flattening out the defense. Having him in the game, having him on the floor next to those two guys, just creates another dynamic downhill threat that probably opens up the floor in a few different ways. If they do get the top pick or the second pick, assuming this player falls to number 2 possibly, Alex Sarr should still be in consideration for a lot of the same reasons I laid out for Donovan Clingan. Yes, you have Mark Williams, but the potential with Alex Sarr to be a key piece of a good defense is immense. He has a lot of versatility to him. You're going to be able to utilize him in drop coverage. You're going to be able to play him at the level of the screen. There's a lot of things that he does extremely well that really stand out to me on film on the defensive end of the floor. Plus, he's got an emerging offensive skill set when it comes to his touch, ability to knock down mid-range jump shots. And then the hope is at some point you turn him into a stretch big and you can have some real positional versatility, maybe play Sarr next to Mark Williams at times, but then Sarr can also be your true center on the floor. Now, the rebounding is a little questionable in those types of situations currently, but if he puts on some weight and improves in that area early in his career, he could become a true anchor of a defense, something I wouldn't be really close to saying yet about him, but there's potential for him to grow into that. Stephon Castle stands out to me as one of the best options for the Hornets this offseason, though, because he's a winner. He's someone who does a lot of things to generate winning for a team and for a program. We saw it this past year with UConn. Now, typically going into my draft evaluation, I don't value winning, quote unquote, too much, because I think that winning is obviously team context dependent. But given the Hornets team context, they already have their primary scoring players. They already have their primary ball handlers in LaMelo Ball, Brandon Miller. I think Stephon Castle slots in very nicely next to the two of them as a very good point of attack defender, a very good screen navigator, something this Hornets team is still lacking, like I mentioned earlier. I think he does a lot of the dirty work that the Hornets need around Brandon Miller and around LaMelo Ball. So starting a rebuild with a guy like Stephon Castle might not be the best way to go about things, but this isn't the start of a rebuild for Charlotte, which is why I think he makes a good deal of sense here for the Hornets. They already have some talent in place. Now it's about finding players who complement those talented players and really push your team toward a winning direction. I think everything Castle does from a defensive perspective and then offensively finding his way to offensive rebounds. I think he has an underrated handle, and really the big question for him is, what does the jump shot look like? If he finds a way to develop in that area, you could be looking at an absolute home run pick here for the Hornets. Matas Buzelis made the list for me as well. Another gap filler in the front court. He's got good positional size. You can play him at the small forward or power forward position. I think the most common comp for him is probably Franz Wagner. I don't think he's as good as Franz Wagner. I don't think he's as fluid of an athlete as Franz Wagner when it comes to getting to the rim all in one move. I think Wagner had a better collection of gathers and dribble pickups to find his way to the rim consistently, whereas Buzelis is a little bit more reliant on his size and touch as a mid-range jump shooter and floater specialist. So I think there's a pretty significant difference between the two in terms of the success they're going to find early in their careers. Because of that, Buzelis will be a little bit more reliant on his touch, but he has some nice touch, and I think around Miller and Ball, he could definitely find a role in this league moving forward. So when it comes to their free agency situation, the Hornets are projected to have negative $8.2 million in cap space this offseason, and Miles Bridges is headed towards unrestricted free agency. Now he has a $15.1 million cap hold. He makes up over half of the Hornets cap hold figure this offseason. So he's definitely an important piece and a player who I'm not sure what his market's really going to look like given his off-the-court issues in the past and his play not really necessarily equating to winning all the time. I'm not exactly sure what Miles Bridges' market looks like this offseason, to be completely honest with you. They do have tradable contracts, so if they want to open up cap space, they could trade Davis Bertans. He's got $16 million left on a player option that he is definitely going to pick up. That is an expiring deal, though, so assuming he picks up that player option, the Hornets could trade him, and probably even if it just comes down to moving down in the draft a couple of spots, find a team to take on that money. Cody Martin, $8.12 million. It's the final year of his guaranteed money as well. He could definitely be a valuable pickup for a team because he's non-guaranteed the following year. So some team would have interest in Cody Martin for sure. Vasi Micic, I said, was going to be on this list. $7.7 million, team option for the following year as well. So these contracts are not bad contracts. Martin's and Micic's and Nick Richards are all good contracts and ones that should have some value around the league. So if the Hornets want to turn some of these players into maybe second-round picks, or maybe if you cobble up Martin and Richards together, maybe you get like pick number 30 in this draft from the Boston Celtics or something, you could find your way to moving these players for some value and opening up cap space in the process. If they trade all four of these guys, you're looking at a significant difference in money. You could go into the offseason with about $30 million in cap space outside of the Miles Bridges situation. So the Hornets definitely have some ways to cap space. How would they look to use that cap space if they open it up? Well, first of all, Nic Claxton, Klay Thompson, Gary Trent Jr., the three players I think could make some good deal of sense for Charlotte if they do actually open up cap space. Nic Claxton's really the headliner here, someone who has Defensive Player of the Year potential. Now, I'm not sure if he's ever going to win one because there's this guy in San Antonio who's probably going to dominate the award for the next decade or so. But Claxton definitely has a lot of traits that I think are going to be impactful on the right team. And I think with his rim pressure, he's got a very good floater that I think is underrated around the league. Claxton could be a very good fit next to LaMelo Ball as a pick and roll partner, while defensively being capable of anchoring the defense for Charlotte. Obviously, yes, they still have Mark Williams. I know some Hornets fans are going to think that I'm overlooking Mark Williams in this video with all my talk about other big men. There's not this decision that they have to make to get rid of Mark Williams if they sign someone like Nic Claxton. You would just have 48 minutes of good center play, which is very, very good. Klay Thompson, this would add some real shooting into the mix for Charlotte. Definitely add some more floor spacing around Brandon Miller and around LaMelo Ball. I think this would be very good for Miller's development, having Klay Thompson next to him, because it would probably put a greater onus on him getting to the rim, finding more opportunities with driving lanes present. And Klay Thompson's quick trigger ability would, I think, still improve the Hornets offense. I know some people are going to say he's washed, he's this, that, and the other thing. All of his numbers still scream that he's an elite shooter and someone that can help you win games. And I think if you have a coach like JJ Redick, for example, a movement shooter like Klay Thompson makes a ton of sense as well. Gary Trent Jr., he would bring some physicality. I think he's a good defensive player. Now, it hasn't always translated to good defensive numbers and metrics, but I think he's up for the task, and I think he would bring some toughness alongside Grant Williams there in Charlotte. Now, if they don't use cap space and instead just use their non-taxpayer mid-level exception, which can be up to about $12.8 million, there's still some players out there that could make a good deal of sense. Kyle Anderson, for me, stands out for a lot of teams. I talked about him for San Antonio. I talked about him for Sacramento. Teams that need a little bit more playmaking juice and a little bit more defense. Kyle Anderson makes a ton of sense. He's an underrated defender around the league, somebody who I think is a very smart, high IQ basketball player. The more of those players you have on your team, the better your team will play. It's just the flat out truth. He's a good two-way player and would significantly help Charlotte. Royce O'Neal, a player who I'm a little bit lower on than most. I think he has a solid impact. I would not be willing to pay him $12.8 million. This would be someone that you'd probably split that number in half, maybe pay him around $7 million, and you'd still have a little bit more flexibility with your mid-level exception there if you split it and sign someone else. DeAnthony Melton would be someone worth signing. He's a very good screen navigator, point of attack defender. This is just a player that the Hornets do not have on their roster right now. They don't have anyone who does the things DeAnthony Melton does. Now, if they draft Stephon Castle, DeAnthony Melton does not become as valuable, but a lot of these free agent targets fit around some of those other draft targets. So if they go big men in the draft, then all of a sudden DeAnthony Melton becomes more valuable for them. Or if they go Stephon Castle, then all of a sudden maybe Kyle Anderson in the front court makes some more sense. So that's where having, kind of optionality is super important depending on what the Hornets want to do. Then my last target here, this is kind of an underrated one. This would be an overpay, but it would probably ensure that you get him in Haywood Highsmith. If you paid him anywhere from $7 to $10 million using your mid-level exception for his restricted free agency tag, the Miami Heat are already up against the cap, and part of the reason why is because they traded for Terry Rozier. Not only are they up against the cap, they're really flirting with the aprons, and they have Caleb Martin as a free agent this offseason. So there's a real risk here for the Miami Heat that they're not going to be able to retain Haywood Highsmith if some team like Charlotte comes in and offers him a small bag. I'm not saying a lot of money. I'm saying $7 to $10 million a year. That would put the Miami Heat in a significant, difficult position that would be tough to retain their players. The Charlotte Hornets could really come in and rob the cradle in a way for Highsmith, who's a very good point of attack defender. I think an emerging offensive player, finding his role in the league a bit. This is a type of player that the Hornets, again, they don't have someone like this. He could make a great deal of sense for Charlotte this offseason, and he's only 27 years old, so he fits right into the time window around Ball and Miller for sure. Franchise direction, this is really the most important part of the video. They're moving forward. There is a lot more optimism from me specifically about this team's direction going forward. I have typically been a lot lower on the Hornets in their future. I think this team, with some of the front office changes, the ownership change, I just like the direction they're moving in. They've accrued more draft picks. They have a lot of opportunities to reinvent what Hornets basketball looks like. Whether that's through drafting, whether that's through developing, whether that's through signing players, trading for players, they have a lot of optionality now, and that is the most important thing in all of basketball. If you have options, you're typically going to be able to solve problems. And I think the Hornets are going to find a lot of ways, a lot of creative ways to solve problems over the next couple of seasons. They're not going to build a winner overnight. I'm not suggesting that by next season they're already a playoff team or a play-in team or anything like that. Maybe they'll get into that play-in mix. But I think they're on the right trajectory moving forward. I think they're trending in the direction of winning basketball, which is really good. These Hornets fans, Charlotte fans in general, really deserve this. You guys have had the history with the Charlotte Bobcats. Look, this team, this organization has not won a playoff series in so long. You guys need to win a playoff series at some point. I think you're trending in the right direction in that regard. I hope you guys really did enjoy today's video. If you did, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more content in the future. Again, thank you all so much for watching. Really appreciate you, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.